Hello everyone. I'm getting to that age where I look back at the generations of consoles I grew up with and I think to myself, oh, we had it so good back then when games and consoles felt fresh and creative. Obviously, this is a bit of an overdramatic statement and we all think our generation was the best. After all, games are still good, fun and creative if you know where to look for them, particularly in the indie scene. But at the same time, it is true that when looking back, the 2000s really felt like a special time. From one generation to the next, we could really see the graphical fidelity increasing. And so the jump between generations meant a lot more. But that's not what this video is about. This video isn't about console graphics or generational leaps. This is a story about, in part, the consoles that redefined the way people play games and particularly a company that made the most out of those systems. This video is about Cing and the legacy they left behind. By the time the Nintendo DS launched in 2004, Satoru Iwata was the president of Nintendo and he very famously implemented the Blue Ocean strategy into their systems, which basically meant tapping into a market and an audience that didn't yet exist, rather than just following the trends and, fighting with Sony and Microsoft over which one had the most powerful console. They tried that with the GameCube, and I'm not sure how many people actually know this, but the GameCube was actually a bit stronger than the PlayStation 2. But in terms of sales, we all know how that went. This shift in mentality was how we ended up with the Nintendo DS and the Wii, two consoles that felt super refreshing at the time and challenged a lot of developers into thinking outside the box in terms of gameplay mechanics and ways a story can be told. I had a Wii growing up, but not a DS unfortunately. However, I'm an adult now with adult money, and so over the past few years I got my hands on a 3DS, a DSi, and a DS Lite, and since then my admiration for these systems has only grown even more. There is one game I played last year that really left a mark on me, and almost 1 year later I still think about it a lot. That game is Hotel Dusk, Room 215. This game was my gateway into Cing, an independent developer studio founded by Takuya Miyagawa in 1999 in Fukuoka, Japan, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name of this place, I'm really sorry. From the get-go, the intention behind the creation of the company was to provide different, creative, and unique gameplay experiences to the players. But unfortunately, their story ended way too soon as the studio went bankrupt in 2010. Despite being around for only about a decade, the games they made deserve to be talked about and appreciated. So I thought it would be a good idea to, in a way, pay homage to the studio and also introduce some of these games to newer audiences. They released 8 games, and yes, we're going to cover all of them. Essentially, I want to get an idea of the underlying identity these games all share and understand what makes a Cing game special. Ask the question, what makes a Cing game a Cing game? So without further ado, let's get started. But before we do, I just want to remind you to like the video if you're liking it so far, and subscribe if you want to see more. That's really the best way for you to tell me if I should be making more videos like this. But this time, for real, let's get started.
Kazuya! Kazuya! Come to me! Hurry! Where are you? Kazuya! Come to me! Hurry!
The first game in our list is Glassrose. Co-developed by Cing and Capcom Production Studio 3, this title is a point-and-click adventure / a psychological horror game released on the PS2 in 2003 in Japan and the next year in Europe. It didn't get a North American release, so it's very likely that a lot of you didn't even know this game existed. I'm European and I'm gonna be honest, even I hadn't heard of this game before starting research for this video. What's particularly interesting is that they used the image of a real person to come up with the protagonist, Masahiro Tatsuoka, from a J-pop band called Tokyo with an I, which I'm pretty sure none of you have heard about. I'm not sure how popular this band was at the time in Japan, but it's curious how this marketing tool was used in the European cover as well. Things were different back then, and for a long time we didn't get a lot of releases that reached North America, like Chrono Trigger. I mean, the first Final Fantasy game we got in Europe was Final Fantasy VII. Can you imagine? From 1 to 6, we didn't get any of that. So it's interesting that Out of all the games to reach Europe at that time, this will be one of them. An interesting marketing strategy for sure, but to be honest, it was around this time that this trend of like games being locked to certain regions started to change and the market started to open a bit more. Nowadays we're very much spoiled, but this wasn't the case back then. In this story, you play as Takashi Kagenati. Again, I am probably mispronouncing a lot of these names, and I probably will during the video, so I apologize in advance. Anyway, he's a reporter investigating an old Japanese mansion with his friend Emi, which we only see through flashbacks at the beginning of the game. A supernatural force knocks him unconscious, and Takashi wakes up in the same room, but 80 years in the past. After some point-and-click investigation where the game basically throws a few tutorials at you, a butler enters the room, and there's a really beautiful interaction that happens, but I'm not even gonna say anything, just watch this for yourself.
How are you feeling, sir? Your color is looking a little better.
Who is this man?
Honestly, if you ask me, based on this alone, this game is a 10 out of 10. But it's maybe too early to give it a rating, so let's continue. After this, the butler refers to you as Kazuya, the lost son of the owner of the mansion, Tenemon Yoshinodo, you get what I mean, who was murdered just the night before. Takashi remembers hearing about the story of this murder, but now he's living it. Lucky him. To make things worse, an investigation is taking place inside the mansion where you are a suspect, and very soon the rest of the family joins and, everyone here is a suspect. All the while, you're uncovering mysteries around the mansion, trying to reconnect with Emi and go back to your timeline. Thematically, there's a lot of paranormal phenomena, and, as you can tell by the premise I just told you and the clock on the left side of the screen, time traveling is a part of this game. But is this enough for this game to offer a unique and creative gameplay experience? After all, that is kind of what Cing is known for. Something that fascinated me about this game was how clearly you can tell what is Capcom and what is Cing. Glass Rose came out before RE4, at a time where Resident Evil was defined by the fixed camera perspective, with pre-rendered backgrounds and interactions with the environment around you that visually had a pretty simple text about the object on screen. It's really cool to see that here. You see this blend of some elements that feel very Capcom-like and a lot of things that feel very Cing-like. However, because this is their first game, a lot of these things aren't fully polished yet. The point-and-click system, for instance, being one of them, because this is something that feels a lot more natural on the DS than it does on the PlayStation 2. Here, what you're basically controlling isn't the character, but where the character is looking, and then you press something and the character moves there. But the problem with this is that sometimes you're trying to get to a specific area, but the camera changes and you're facing the wrong way, so it's a bit convoluted, it's not fully polished, but it is something. We have mechanics like the clock, which moves time forward for each action you take. If you fail to move past a certain area within an hour, the game resets. Adding to that, there's also mind points, which deplete when taking certain actions, such as the ability you get of reading people's minds. By reaching 0, you'll be blown out of the current time period and fall through a hole in space-time, and your game will be over. I'm quoting the game, by the way. So if you get lost for too long or use your abilities a lot, the game will punish you. There's these heart fragments which belonged to Emi when she arrived in this time-distorted place, and they are basically tiny flashes of light you see during investigation. Pretty simple stuff. What's not so simple about this game is the dialogue aspect of it. Yes, there's a lot of dialogue in this game. You see, while the game has a lot of these investigation sequences, a huge part of it involves dialogue and picking the right option during conversations to advance the plot. You do that by highlighting a certain word in a sentence. The game can be quite brutal because you have to do this manually, and if you by accident count a blank space between words, it's not going to count. At least from my experience, this is what happened. Additionally, there's also dialogue trees that will emerge. Highlighting a certain word will lead you down one route of dialogue, but you might end up in a dead end and have to trace it back a few sentences to try and highlight a different word. This can be quite challenging, and I imagine that as the game progresses, this only gets more difficult. I tried to use a guide, but the only one I could find was from 2004, and it's not the easiest to follow. So I will say, if you're playing this game now blind in 2025, it will probably be a bit difficult. I know I'm being quite negative about a lot of things in this game, but it doesn't mean there aren't things about it that are worth celebrating. A game from 2003 being outdated isn't something that's that surprising. For every masterpiece that holds up 20 years later, there's hundreds, and I mean hundreds of games that just don't. Yes, the game is clunky and it is frustrating, but there is something fascinating about going back in time, pun not intended by the way, and getting immersed in this visual style. I love the cutscenes. This type of character design and art style feels very nostalgic to me. I feel like as long as you know what you're getting into, and as long as you're willing to deal with some old school mechanics, there's something unique here, particularly if you really care about Cing. Video games are a creative art form. There's real people with ideas and their own identities behind these games. Capcom Production Studio 3 was responsible for porting the RE games to the GameCube, as well as working on some spin-offs at the time. Having played some of the more recognized Cing and Capcom games, it's interesting to look back and see the blend between these ideas. But what happens when you take lessons from this project and improve upon it? We are finally getting to the games that a lot of you might recognize. This is Another Code 2 Memories, also known as Trace Memory in North America. This is Cing's second game and their first on the DS, released in 2005. It's a point-and-click adventure and a visual novel, this time taking advantage of the DS's hardware to incorporate touch controls that has you solving puzzles and interacting with the environment around you. You play as Ashley Mizuki Robbins, a 13-year-old girl on her way to Blood Edward Island after receiving a message from her father on a device called the DAS, which looks a lot like the DS if you ask me. This device was left to her only, as it uses biometrics, assuring that Ashley is the only one with access to it. You see, Ashley has lived without her parents since she was very young. Her aunt Jessica has taken care of her for all these years, and all this time she thought her father was dead. But as it turns out, he's a scientist who has been working on a mysterious project known as Another on this isolated island. He asked his sister, Jessica, to keep this a secret from her, promising he would one day return. On her way to this island, she hopes to uncover the secrets behind the disappearance of both her mother and father, but soon she finds herself involved in another series of mysteries. After a quick tutorial on the boat that tells you how to use the DAS, aka the tool through which you'll be solving lots of puzzles, you finally arrive at the island, but your father isn't there to see you. So, Jessica goes on ahead to try and find him, but soon she also vanishes. Now, Ashley is temporarily left on her own, so she goes and tries to find Jessica. I say temporarily because soon after you encounter a very special friend who will keep you company on your journey. When you try to enter the mansion and notice the gate is closed, you need to take an alternative route. You walk past a cemetery, or a graveyard depending where you are, where you meet Dee, a ghost that's been living, pun intended by the way, on this island for 50 plus years. However, no one has been able to actually see him apart from Ashley. He explained that this is because of her ability to see the good in people. Dee had his memory wiped out, and throughout your journey, he comes to remember more details about his life, about his father and his family. Just like you, he's basically looking for answers. Your motives align, and through the story, Dee becomes a vessel for you to learn more about the lore of the island and the Edwards family, the original owners of the mansion. Throughout the game, you will, you guessed it, talk to people and explore the mansion through the use of touchscreen. While some of these puzzles aren't that impressive nowadays, and frankly a bit repetitive, some actually manage to take advantage of the DS's unique features, like the microphone. Some others have you overlaying a photo with another photo to create a double exposure. I'm gonna be honest, I really loved my time with this game. I actually played Another Code Recollection on the Switch, more on that later by the way, which changed a few puzzles to accommodate for the controls, and I thought this was a perfect game to play over the holiday season. Its runtime is quite short, and it can be played in short bursts, as the saving option is pretty much always available to you.
He's the one who told me to come to this island. So where is he?
An aspect of this game that was also streamlined when compared to Glassrose is the dialogue. Notice how here, when you interact with a character, dialogue options will show up on the lower screen, showing you how to advance the story. It's really as easy as just pressing the options you see on screen. In Glassrose, you play as a journalist, so it makes sense that the game will implement a feature like reading between the lines of what someone is saying. But still, my point still stands, because I don't think that feature was properly implemented, and playing this game after that one, it felt very refreshing to me because of the simplicity it provides. On a visual level, the game looks beautiful. Sure, some of the pre-rendered images on the top screen don't look as nice, but I think the focus here are the character portraits and the scenery. It's important to remember that by 2005, the DS had only been out for about a year, so the full potential of what could be achieved on the console was not fully yet materialized. Two Memories marks the debut of Daisuke Kanazaki as a director and character designer at the company, a role he will take on a few other emblematic projects. And by the way, if you like any of the games he made, he seems to have a really good relationship with his fans, so feel free to follow him on Twitter if for some reason you're still using that website. Before I deleted my account, I actually followed him and he followed me back. He seems to interact with a lot of fan art, which is so lovely and kind of rare to see these days. But enough glazing on my end. Rika Suzuki, who worked as a scenario writer in Glassrose, is back, and again, you'll see more of her in other projects. She's the game and scenario designer in this game, and in my opinion, this is one of her best works. Everything about the world of Another Code radiates coziness. I genuinely love it so much. There is also the producer, Takuya Miyagawa, and some returning composers like Kenjiro Matsuo and Yuichi Makamura. Something that I think it's worth highlighting in this game is how it uses magical realism. If you've ever read anything by Murakami, you know what I'm talking about. You have this character going to a jazz club and, on the way they see a cat and the cat talks to them, and, this is obviously something that will not happen in the real world. In the real world, Ashley will not be talking to a ghost. But it manages to incorporate these fantasy-like scenarios into a world that feels actually real and believable, and I think that's very admirable. During the development of this game, particularly towards the end, a lot of problems arose that forced the team to make a few changes. Critically, the game had mixed reviews on Metacritic, while Famitsu gave it a 35 out of 40. Some of the criticism comes from how easy the game feels sometimes, as it targets more of a younger audience, which makes sense when you consider the DS's player base. This isn't your Zero Escape type of game, that's for sure. But looking back at the game now, 20 years after its original release, and yes, it's been 20 years, it's absolutely insane. I can safely say that yes, this game aged well and can still be enjoyed today. Another Code marks the beginning of Cing, as a lot of us remember them today. It established concepts that will be further developed in future entries, while being a good gateway into the genre. One of the reasons I still think it's worth having a Nintendo DS in 2025 is because of games like these. While it can be played through other means, and again there's a remake I'll briefly touch on at the end of the video, there's something so special about this game on the DS that cannot be replicated. The next game in our list is Hotel Dusk Room 215, and I'm gonna be very honest with you, this video will not exist without this game. As I mentioned in the introduction of the video, this was the first game I played by Cing, and I loved it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That game made me want to explore some of Cing's other games, and as you can imagine, it's a game that I absolutely love, and if you played it, there's a chance you'll love it too. It's a cult classic for a reason. So last year, I had just bought a DS Lite that needed some fixing, so in the meantime I was using a borrowed one from a family member. The pieces that hold the two screens together was broken, but I still gave it a go and looked for a few games to start my journey. Keeping the screens together with the palm of my hand, I landed on a game called Hotel Dusk Room 215 and fell in love with it from the very beginning. In this game, you play as Kyle Hyde, who is a former cop working as a salesman for a company called Red Crown, who is sent to a hotel just outside LA. He's there to collect a package. Kyle does door-to-door sales stuff, but his job has a mystery to it. And what's that mystery, you ask? Well, Kyle finds things that don't want to be found. It's a discreet part of the job. He doesn't ask more questions than he has to, he just gets the job done. He's someone with a story, a past that follows him wherever he goes. Upon entering and speaking to the manager, he finds out that his package still hasn't arrived, so he books a room to stay overnight. In this hotel, every room has a name, and our salesman ends up with room 215, the room that supposedly grants wishes. Everything about Kyle's past, the hotel, the people in it, are a mystery at first, but like any great detective novel, these hooks lure you into the world, and it doesn't take long for the player to feel involved and wanting to know more. You meet all sorts of people here. The owner of the place, an elderly lady who checks in, desiring the room that grants wishes as well. You meet a bellboy that resembles someone from Hyde's past, a father and a daughter with a complicated story, and a wannabe writer, and so many more people, honestly. These are all very flawed and broken people. This is something you notice at first, even about Kyle. Each with their own story, which through the course of one day, all seemingly connect. In this hotel, everything happens for a reason. And what's more, you soon find out that someone with your name checked in on this very same hotel. And by the description of it, this person seems to be Bradley, your ex-partner who, when working on a case of a crime organization that went terribly wrong, vanished. At the turn of every corner, literally behind every door, there's a new mystery waiting to be solved. Hotel Dusk does a good job at slowly introducing these things to you. When you meet a character, you're basically presented with an initial premise, a conflict stirring within that person. They all have their own backstories, and I found them all interesting. The game is very minimalist, but very intentional. Being yet another point-and-click adventure and a visual novel released on the DS in 2007, this title proves that Cing took all the right lessons from their past projects and created here with Hotel Dusk something unique. In fact, it is made by the same team, mostly I believe. For starters, you hold the DS sideways, and kind of as if you were holding a book. The game still takes advantage of the unique features of the console, but this time it goes even further and gets more creative with it. You need to blow on the mic, scratch the screen with the stylus, but you also need to close and open the DS to solve some of the puzzles. Being a detective, of course, you take notes, which is done through a notebook that you can write on with a stylus, a feature that makes the game all the more enjoyable on original hardware, when compared to emulation, for instance. Although, I'll say, if you can, get this on the DSi XL, because from my experience, trying to write anything on the smaller DS Lite was a struggle at times. I know we all have phones now that we can take notes on, something that wasn't common at the time, but let me tell you, the novelty is still there. I still found it fun and engaging to actually write on the DS. As you can tell by looking at the footage on screen, this game looks beautiful. Once again, characters are hand-drawn, but they have so much motion to them, even though they're basically still images. I mean, look at Kyle and his smile here, come on, how can you not love something like this? Add the setting and the characters with a beautiful soundtrack, and the end result is something that, in a lot of areas, resembles some of the things that Cing has done before, while making them feel like a more serious package. If another code was a bit criticized for catering to a younger audience, Hotel Dusk commits a bit more to providing a more complex game with a wider range of players in mind. It's serious in tone, and it does get darker as the story progresses, but nothing that daunting. Navigation is overall accessible, but I can definitely tell you there were moments where if it wasn't for a guide, I don't think I'd figure out what to do in certain segments on my own. This is really my only criticism, and even then, I feel like this might just be a me problem, because apart from that, this is a game I absolutely adore and made me fall in love with the company. While researching this video, I knew I was bound to find some oddities. Monster Rancher DS is one of those games, because I wasn't even aware of its existence. It never released in Europe, so this is quite normal. Instead, it was only released in Japan in 2008 and in North America in 2010. To my surprise though, looking at the characters and the monsters in this game, I unlocked a childhood memory, because I used to watch this anime, I just completely forgot about it, and I don't think I even remembered what the name of the anime was. I remember the main character and these really cool monsters, the rabbit, the wolf, and I'm not sure if that's a beaver. Is that a platypus? A beaver? I'm not sure. But yeah, basically I never realized this was a video game franchise that was then adapted to an anime. In fact, 11 games in this series were released before Monster Rancher DS. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this series, basically it's a life sim where you breed and battle with monsters that you grow on your ranch. In the first original game on the PlayStation 1, this is actually pretty cool. The way you will breed them was basically you will put a music CD on the PlayStation, and then when you boot up the game, it will recognize a certain song, and based on that song, you will get a monster. With all its credit, this is a pretty unique and a very cool feature. One that, unfortunately, however, it's hard to adapt to modern platforms. So the way this DS game went about breeding monsters is creative in its own way. Basically, you can draw wherever you want, or you can speak to the microphone. I tried both, but when I spoke to the mic, the monster that came out was too big to fit in my ranch, so I just used the ones I drew. I'm not sure how accurate they are, but when I drew a heart with petals, an interesting flower monster came out. My favorite though is probably this cat in an apple. I mean, come on, look at this. So I would say the drawings are kind of accurate. You're eventually always going to be drawing something that is randomly going to resemble a monster. So it's pretty fun, and you can just mess around and try a few times to see if you get a monster that you like. When you are not breeding the monsters, you're training them or letting them rest and giving them food. Each monster will be prone to do well in certain trainings. For instance, my first monster was good at leveling up its attack power, while my second one was more intelligence. The game has a calendar system where for every time you let them get rest or train them, a week goes by. Yes, these guys need to rest for a week. Imagine what kind of life they have. I want to have that life. But on a serious note, once a month, you can give them a food item, all with different benefits. Some will give them plenty of energy while making them fat or increase their levels of stress. And on top of that, every monster has a food they prefer over others. So if you're like me and you're just playing without any sort of understanding of how this game works, it will require some trial and error until you land on their favorite item, but that's just the way it is. You can always look up online and, make your life easier. But I decided to go in blind. There are tournaments taking place once a month, for which you have to register in advance. You start with the lower rank, which is E, and progress from there. The battles take place on a grid, where you can move up or down, getting closer or more distant to the enemy, basically. Different attacks have different ranges, so you're always trying to balance offense and defense. Think of Mega Man Battle Network, although, to be honest, I think that's a better game, but it tries to do something similar, but just a bit more repetitive. And that's honestly the main problem with this game. It gets repetitive pretty fast. You battle for 5 minutes and you've basically seen almost everything. As you can see in these battles, I'm getting my ass handed to me because I'm too weak. I didn't do enough drills, which are basically an exploration mode where you're on a board game, you roll a dice, and depending on where you land, you get different effects. This is how you'll learn different attacks and level up some stats. To this game's credit, I think there's a natural sense of progression, because certain monsters can only take you so far, and you'll soon need to create new ones. To get better monsters, you freeze the ones you own, like literally freeze them, and combine with another monster. Certain traits will carry over, and through this you get more powerful monsters. That's pretty much all there is to it. You improve your ranch, do battles, explore, and repeat. Fitting for a portable game, but unfortunately this isn't doing anything that other games don't do better. I was gonna mention Pokemon, but I actually think Digimon World is a better example. And the reviews at the time agree with me. IGN gave this a 5.5 out of 10 and Famitsu a 29 out of 40. If you are trying to get into this series, I will personally recommend you the Game Boy Advance game, either that or the Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX, which was released for the Nintendo Switch. The next game on our list is Little King's Story, a real-life simulator role-playing game, I don't know how to label these games anymore, which was released in 2009 both in Europe, North America and Japan for the Nintendo Wii. In this story, you play as a little king in the kingdom of Alpoco, with the power to enchant people into obeying you, all thanks to the crown you wear. When you start the game, you're basically in a small village with a few good-for-nothing adults, but thanks to your powers, you command them to do things for you that improve the village. To achieve with this, the game uses a job system. The first one available to you is farming, and the people do basic tasks such as digging, breaking rocks, and, well, obviously farming. Then you unlock the fighters, who aren't as good at digging or farming, but they're great in combat and easily kill any enemy in your way. And trust me, you're gonna need good fighters to defeat these powerful animals known as UMAs, which are super strong and terrorize parts of the town, blocking your access to certain areas. You start with 5 people joining your expedition team, but as you collect resources, you build more houses, which means more jobs, and as such, the town expands. After just about an hour and a half or so of playtime, I went from this to this. Furthermore, there are also carpenters, which allow you to access new areas through bridges and stairs. You eventually get access to 8 people in your party instead of 5, and as such it becomes a bit easier to manage jobs from there. Ideally, if you're exploring new areas, you want to have people for digging and breaking things, but you also want to keep a few fighters to help you along the way. If you don't, villagers will die more easily. But don't worry too much about this at the start, because you get a lot of money from digging and basic resources, which apart from the job houses also let you build normal houses to host more civilians, as well as a church. So you are incentivized to strategize. Do you need more fighters? Do you need more farmers? Or will you need a carpenter to help you build a case of stairs along the way? It will vary from situation to situation, but this is a big part of the game. If you are not careful and don't pay attention to the stars above your head, you will die and it's gonna be game over. So the civilians around you can die, but you cannot. In this story, you're accompanied by Hauser, Liam, and Verde. As you progress, you are challenged by another kingdom, which you then conquer, taking their money and resources, and even the princess who joins you. Hauser then tells you that you should aim to conquer the remaining 6 kingdoms scattered around, which all have their respective evil kings and princesses. As you can tell, this game resembles Pikmin a lot, which is not a bad thing, mind you. It's good to take inspiration from the greats, as long as you're able to add your own twist to it. I'd say there's enough here to make this experience unique. It uses a familiar formula, but plays with interesting concepts while offering an engaging narrative. For the type of game it is, at least. This is because the story is essentially a retelling of a child's diary. You really get that sense of childlike wonder from the very opening sequence. The cutscenes have this hand-drawn style to them, and even during gameplay, everything looks very cartoonish. Depending on which part of the world you're in, you'll notice that the backgrounds have these soft lights glowing, almost as if you were looking into a memory or a dream rather than actually, being locked into reality. It's the small things that bring this game together. And maybe this isn't so surprising to some of you, especially the people who played this game before. At the time, this got really good reviews, with Famitsu giving it a 32 out of 40. Fun fact, if you've played No More Heroes before, I can tell you the director of this game was the producer of that series. And by the way, he also worked on the maps for Cing Saga 1 and 2. Does this part need to be in the video? No, but I found this out and I thought it was interesting. So hey, if you like JRPGs, there you go. There were plans to release a sequel for the title, but unfortunately, since Cing went bankrupt shortly after the game's release, this never happened. Still, the company that holds the rights for the game is Marvelous, which I love the games they put out here in the West. They really pay attention to the physical editions they put out, and as a physical collector, I really love their games. This is a bit of an off-topic thing, but yeah, I just really like what they do. But yeah, basically in 2016, they ported the game to PC via Steam, so if you're interested in trying this for yourself, which I absolutely think you should, especially if you like Pikmin and Animal Crossing, you can do so. It has good reviews on Steam. I know at launch it wasn't very well received, it had a lot of problems, but I believe these problems have been fixed since then. 2 Wii games back to back. Up to this point, Cing hadn't worked on any direct sequels to their games, but this all changed in 2009 with the release of Another Code R, A Journey into Lost Memories, on the Nintendo Wii. This game only released in Japan and Europe, so it's very likely that some of you American viewers didn't know this game came out, probably, which is a shame. Two Memories was undoubtedly one of their most well-received games, and so it was time to catch up on our protagonist, Ashley Robbins. 2 years have passed since her adventures at Blood Edward Island, where she reunited with her dad and learned the truth about what happened to her mother, or at least parts of it. Ashley is 16 now, an angst teenager who has become a more self-reliant person. She's into music and wants to start a band, just like me when I was at that age. But she has a more defined personality, and her interests become a bigger part of her character, something that wasn't really achieved with the first game. After her reunion with her father, Richard, it didn't take long for him to get immersed in his own research and eventually disappear again into a lake to conduct his research. He was supposed to come home to visit his daughter during the weekends, but over time he stopped doing that. This becomes an early point of tension, and from here on out, their father and daughter relationship will be further explored, which is something really interesting that wasn't possible in the first game. But I think it's a great thing that we got to spend more time with these characters and really see them as people, explore their relationships and their pasts, which is something that Cing is known for, like exploring these sides of their characters. Ashley gets a message from her father inviting her to go to Lake Juliet, where he's conducting his research, to camp together and bond. As luck would have it, Ashley's bag gets stolen when she's leaving the bus, so things aren't off to a great start. What's more, her father, who was supposed to be there to pick her up, hasn't shown up. Just like in the first game, some things never change. So Ashley has to go to the camp by herself, stopping by the shop on her way there to learn a bit more about the location, and this is basically the tutorial version of the game. As she opens the gate to the camp, she has a flashback. A memory with her mother. Something seems familiar, but this is the first time she's visiting this place, so she pays no mind to it. But finally, Ashley and her father can finally talk. They get into a heated argument over his behavior and distance as a father. Ashley is very angry, and rightfully so, but she gets past those emotions as her mother is brought up to the conversation. Well, don't you know it? Turns out this is not the first time Ashley has visited this lake. She's been to this place before with her mother when she was just 3 years old. More memories come to her as her father hands her the task device linked to her biometrics, which is a new device which happens to look a lot like the Wii controller. Compared to Two Memories, A Journey into Lost Memories is a more mature game. While this game still focuses on the secrets behind a particular location, it also has a bigger emphasis on family relationships. The mysteries behind the murder of Ashley's mother and the research she was conducting weren't really explored too much in the DS game, so I think it's fair to say that this sequel makes sense. I don't think this is just a cash grab. There is a story here that actually matters and deserves to be explored. It's good to see a more human and mature side to these characters we know and love, but this is not the only change. For once, it's running on the Wii, which is a much more powerful console compared to the DS. This isn't really a 3D game, you can't run in a 3D environment. Instead, you just move left and right when moving locations, and you click on 3D objects when exploring indoors. Apart from this, the game looks absolutely gorgeous, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not. I'll go as far as to say that this is the best looking game made by Cing. It has this watercolor look to it, which fits the game very well. Just like Two Memories and Hotel Dusk, it has this minimalist look to it, and what this does is it allows your mind and imagination to fill some of the gaps. This is achieved through, once again, a fantastic soundtrack. So I will say that yes, this game is also very immersive. Now here's an interesting fact. Weirdly enough, it doesn't have as many puzzles as the original game, at least in the opening hours. Moving forward in the story is relatively straightforward. If the original had you solving puzzles before even entering the mansion, here all you have to do is talk to people. The puzzles are very minimal. This is definitely much more of a visual novel than a puzzle game, which is interesting. I wasn't really aware of the Wii being a console for visual novels, but personally I welcome it. As usual, let's finalize this segment of the video by talking about the public reception the game had. I think a lot of people still look at Two Memories as being the better game, and that's because the Wii title had a slower pace overall, and also less people played it because it wasn't released in North America, so it isn't as well remembered as the first game. It can be a bit slower to get through a few scenes, and some of the dialogue I think overstays its welcome. Famitsu gave this game a 28 out of 40, while IGN gave it a whopping 8 out of 10. It's such a novel thing, again, to have a visual novel on the Wii. While I do think that yes, Another Code feels more at home on the DS, I really can't say anything about the way it plays on the Wii. The cursor uses motion controls, but you can kind of ignore it and just use the D-pad instead, which is what I was doing most of the time, to be honest. Obviously, visual novels are much more suited for PCs and handhelds, but yeah, this is a personal preference, but it's interesting that this game exists. If you thought that Hotel Dusk and Another Code were the only text-based adventures that Cing released on the DS, well, think again. Okay, fine, I'll see myself out. I'm not proud of this pun. But that's right, there is another, much less known and talked about game coming out around this time called Again. Sorry, it's Again interactive crime novel. Take a shot for every time I say again in this section of the video, by the way. So what happens when you take some elements from Hotel Dusk, like a mystery unraveling around a hotel and a detective working on a case, but make everything about it much less appealing? Well, you file for bankruptcy. It seems like a cruel joke, but around the time Again released, Cing filed for bankruptcy. I'll go in more detail over this at the end of the video, but for now it's important to contextualize what was going on at Cing. The morale, I imagine, was pretty low and they had 2 more games coming out. The first one was Again. This title was released at the very end of 2009 in Japan and in the earlier months of 2010 in North America. It never got an European release. As you can see by looking at the footage, this was Cing's attempt at tapping into the North American market by making a visual novel that felt more mature and dealt with murders in a more serious tone while offering more complex systems. The cutscenes are entirely full motion video, which is definitely a bold choice. I think a big part of the charm that Another Code and Hotel Dusk had to them was precisely their distinctive art style, how full of life they are, and how they allowed you to connect with the story in a more poetic way. But that's not what we have here, and listen, this game didn't have to be like what came before. Cing have proven they're capable of adapting and creating games that feel unique in different genres. But instead, this feels like them chasing a trend, wanting to have the look of a crime show like CSI but adapted into a DS game. But if that's what you want, if you're trying to tap into a more mature American market, why release this game on the DS? We can all state the obvious when looking at things in hindsight, but I imagine a more polished version of this game would have performed better on a system like the PS2, the PS3, or even the PSP. For once, the backgrounds in this game are very blurry and dark. I imagine a more powerful console would have been able to deliver on that front. And second, because this game doesn't benefit as much from having the functionalities of the DS as much as the other games. Sure, just like Hotel Dusk, you're holding the console vertically like a book, but the way you control the characters is different. Outside of crime scenes, you're basically just going through menus, and in the investigation scenes you have to use either the D-pad or the buttons to actually walk, which can get uncomfortable at times. On an emulator you don't feel this as much, but when you're actually holding a DS, particularly a DSi XL, which is the bigger and heavier, this gets a bit uncomfortable, and I just realized I'm probably the only person complaining about this in 2025, but hey, that's the beauty of making videos like these. Now, let's talk about the story and the plot. What's the actual plot of this game? Is this just like an episode of CSI? Well, kind of. Here, you play as Jonathan, or Jay, as he prefers to be called, and you're an FBI agent who, alongside your partner Kate, are looking into a murder that took place at Hotel Miranda, which looks exactly like a series of murders that happened 90 years in the past where 5 people died. It's the same exact pattern and everything, so it's very likely that the killer is back. Some people, even within your group, argue that this might be a copycat, but very quickly this is proven to not be the case. I mean, what will be the fun in that? What's more, Jay has some unique abilities that he can use. If you've watched the whole video, or at least the first game I covered, Glass Rose, this will sound quite familiar to you, and that's because Jay has the ability to see things through time. When you are investigating a crime scene, one screen will show you things as they are in the present, while the other shows things in the past. You have to spot what's different, press the stylus, and interact with a certain object. You can also press and hold the stylus, which unlocks an ability where you can basically see what's happening at a certain location and discover secrets by doing that. It's like magic on top of magic. It's extra magic. You have a meter at the top that depletes the more you use this ability, and when you run out, it's game over. When you are not doing this, you're solving puzzles. They are very hit or miss. For a game like this, it was important for them to get this part right, have good puzzles that keep the player engaged, but unfortunately, I don't think this was as well executed as it was on their previous games. It's unfortunate that this game turned out the way it did with the reception it had at the time. If you can tell by now, I love Cing. I'm making this video for a reason, so I knew along the way I would find some odd titles. There are some good ideas here, but at this point in time, it was important for this game to, at the very least, resonate well with its target audience. But unfortunately, it seems like they missed the mark. While Famitsu gave this title a 30 out of 40, IGN gave it a 4.5 out of 10. And I agree with them. I embrace Cing's willingness to do something different with a familiar formula, but at this time there was no room to fail. Cing went bankrupt. But our story is not over yet. They still had one last shot, one last game, their last chance to leave their mark in the game industry, and this is the result.
Imagine if your actions could create a novel, a story of conspiracy and murder. Solve the dark secret about Kyle Hyde's past. Travel back in time to unravel the breathtaking riddle of the whole unbelievable truth. Are you prepared for the new interactive mystery thriller from the creators of Hotel Dusk? Last Window, only on Nintendo DS.
If there is one word I could use to describe the story of Kyle Hyde, I would use poetic. Hotel Dusk is a very simple and effective game. What really sucks you into the game is the sense of wonder. It drop feeds you information, and that creates a spark in you. You want to know more, and it really doesn't matter if the touch screen looks like this. That spark, that sense of wonder is the driving force behind the game. And so, by the time the story ended, I felt very melancholic. I was okay with saying goodbye to these characters, but I did wonder a lot about what happened next in their lives. Kyle and Mila specifically. Hotel Dusk matters, because its people and their stories matter. People at Cing thought this too, I believe. Their time in the industry wasn't very long. They spent about a decade making games, and I can't imagine the bittersweet feeling they had when this game released. I can only hope that by working on Last Window, The Secret of Cape West, or at least looking at it in retrospective, they managed to find a sense of closure to this adventure. As a fan of their games and characters, that's what I felt when I played this game. Last Window, The Secret of Cape West was the very last game published by Cing. It came out in 2010, both in Europe and Japan, but because the company was going under, they ended up not releasing the game in North America. So it's likely that some of you watching this never heard of this game, or at least never had a chance to play it on original hardware. Which is absolutely criminal because Last Window is Cing at their absolute best. It builds on top of what Hotel Dusk accomplished, making for a really compelling narrative and an enhanced gameplay experience compared to the first entry. You don't need to tap at the bottom of the screen anymore to advance the dialogue. Tap anywhere and the conversation will carry on. Knowing where to go and what to do is more intuitive now, as Kyle always talks to himself about what he should be doing at the end of a conversation. There are more cinematic moments as well, but none of this would matter if it wasn't for the narrative. This is, as you can see, a text-based adventure just like the first title, and so plot comes first. The puzzles, of course, play a big role, and they are good and engaging, if not more refined. But the reason for a sequel to exist is because you want to see more of Kyle Hyde and what happened after he left Hotel Dusk. It's the end of the year, the streets are decorated with Christmas lights. It's the festive season, time to celebrate, and reflect on the end of another year. But just 1 year after the events of the first game, Kyle doesn't find that many reasons to celebrate. He just got fired, and on top of that, the apartment he's been living in is closing down very soon. He's still the flawed person we've grown to love. His mailbox is filled to the brim, letters and bills completely ignored for months. His rent is overdue, and he's struggling to pay it. The plot really starts to expand when he learns that the place is closing down so suddenly. What is now a rundown apartment used to be a hotel, until a murder took place 13 years in the past and forced the owners to sell. Now, it's Margaret, the new owner, who finds it hard to justify keeping the place open. But there's more to it, a secret lurking beneath the shadows. Why does she want to sell this place now? Is she hiding something? There's also a secret letter for Kyle, a personal request asking for him to locate an item, the Scarlet Star, which is odd because requests always go through Red Crown, but not this time. This is an important request for him and him only, an item related to the hotel linked to 25 years ago. Just like A Journey into Lost Memories did it for Ashley, this sequel allows us to know more about Kyle as a character. We get to see his mother on the phone with him, telling him that a strange man called, asking for him. We learn about his father who was murdered, and his case that is now being reopened after so many years. As the story unfolds, all of these loose ends, the apartment's closure, the secrets this place holds, Kyle's dad's death, a lost item from 25 years ago. It's beautiful to see those loose ends come together, and the journey is always engaging because of, once again, the people in it. Last Window was criticized a bit because some people didn't think the characters were as memorable as the first game, and while not everyone has a properly developed backstory, I still think this is just as impactful of a game as the first one. Tony is this game's version of Lewis, someone a bit dodgy, who's a good person at heart, but finds it hard to keep it together. Betty has a quirky personality, while Marie is a lot more mysterious and is clearly hiding a lot about her life. You don't know too much about most people in the apartment, even though they've lived with you for a while. You've barely talked to most of them, in fact, which again tells you a lot about Kyle. But in these few days in which the story takes place, you come to learn more about them than you ever thought you would. Last Window is a bit longer than its predecessor, which is absolutely fine and just goes to show how much more complex the story is. You're still learning new things about Niall, imagine that. I don't want to spoil anything, but the game is very different from what I was expecting, in a good way. I live in a big metropolitan city, so I take public transport every time I leave the house, and my DSi has been following me around. It's during these periods of downtime that I sit down to enjoy Last Window. I can't believe that I almost forgot to mention this, but there is a book that gets filled up as the story unfolds, so if you put the game down and don't play it for a bit, when you come back, you can check the book, put a bookmark in the page you're reading, so you're never gonna feel lost. It's a really cool feature, and the soundtrack is just as good as the first game. I'll echo the sentiment that I shared in Hotel Dusk and reiterate how good of a soundtrack Cing games have. When it comes to public reception, from what I could find online, it sold around 110,000 copies worldwide. It's hard to know for sure, because it didn't get a lot of marketing material, and as I said before, it didn't release in North America, which obviously is going to impact massively its sales figures. The only information I could find was from a forum and a post from 14 years ago, so don't take my word for it. Famitsu gave this game a 32 out of 40, while IGN gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Some fans preferred this over Hotel Dusk though. That's a sentiment I see a lot online, but some others still prefer Hotel Dusk because they feel like it's a bit better developed. I genuinely can't pick a favorite. I think they complement each other super well. Obviously, if you're going to play one, play Hotel Dusk first, and if you like that game, definitely play this one. When it comes to physical copies though, unfortunately, the prices have gone up over the past years. They now retail on eBay for around £50 in the UK, and just as a reference, I got Hotel Dusk last year for around £12. And with that, our journey comes to an end. Or does it? What a journey this has been. We've covered 8 games, and right now it's time to reflect on them and answer the question I proposed in my introduction. What makes a Cing game a Cing game? There are a few oddities like Monster Rancher DS or Again, but in general, Cing was really good at crafting compelling point-and-click adventures that explored stories of trauma, family relationships, and people learning to find their place in life. In these stories, people are wounded, they're broken, and these games invite us into their worlds to reflect on our own journey as people and as adults. Because I think the more you age, the more you relate to a lot of these characters. Cing was also extremely creative and never backed down when it came to make big decisions. They took risks at a time where it was easier to get these types of games done. Just look at the amount of games coming out in 2009, that's unthinkable right now. They were particularly good with the DS, although you can look at games like Little King's Story as an example of a game that tries to be different from their common point-and-click adventures. Not every game was a success. Any team of creatives that takes risks is bound to deliver results that don't always meet expectations. Glassrose is definitely a weird game, the same way Again felt like it could have been so much more, and it's unfortunate that even their most successful games never made it to a mainstream market and are more known today for being cult classics. The gaming industry can be cruel, perhaps now even more than it was back in the 2000s. But if nothing else, I hope I get some of you to at least try these games, because a lot of them are pure art, a masterclass on how creativity can be used in interactive media. So now it's time to address the elephant in the room, and I am of course talking about Another Code Recollection. Listen, if you need proof that Cing's legacy still matters today, then this remake is the proof of that. It adapts these games into full 3D environments and changes some of the puzzles so they are suited to be played on the Switch. In some ways, Recollection is a downgrade because there is a certain magic in, blowing on your mic and doing silly things like that to solve puzzles. But I would absolutely recommend this collection to everyone. If you have a Switch and have never played Another Code before, there you go, you can check this out. I promise you're gonna like this game. The original staff is credited here, but I'm not sure how much of an involvement they had with it. If they are credited because they actually worked on the game, or it's because it's based on their original work.
I remember it all.
This world really works in mysterious ways. Literally, the day after I finished writing the script, news started coming out. Check this out. Nintendo has filed a new trademark for Cing's 2007 DS adventure game Hotel Dusk Room 215. That's a real article. I don't think it's a matter of if anymore, but when. At some point in the Switch 2's lifespan, I believe we're gonna see a collection of Hotel Dusk and Last Window, and I promise you I'll be there day one. Now this begs the question, should you still play Hotel Dusk and Last Window? I would say yes if you have original hardware. The DS experience can't be replicated, so if you have a DS and a means to play these games, I would say go for it. But if you don't, waiting for the remakes is also fine. And this concludes the video, this time for good. It was a bit of an ambitious project for me to cover 8 games, and originally this was just going to be about Hotel Dusk, but over time it just grew more and more. So please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. I can't stress enough how much engagement matters, especially to smaller channels. The smallest thing really means the world to me. Thank you for watching, I'm so grateful to have you around, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.